Crazy. Little Mosey. What? Get out of here.
In a shocking move, a Chinese consul publicly warned about beheading Japan's prime minister.
Vicious words being exchanged between the two countries.
The dirty head that sticks itself in must be cut off. Things turned so ugly that China has warned Japan of a crushing defeat and even issued a travel advisory warning its citizens not to visit Japan.
Sanae Takaichi says an armed attack on the island would be a survival-threatening situation.
The only reason Japan pissed China off so much is because it hit China's most sensitive nerve. Not once, but twice. It's so sensitive it would hate getting it exposed on YouTube and would try to bury it in the algorithm. Except you can help us by clicking on the like button. Thank you. The storm began brewing a few months ago with a political shift. On October 21st, 2025, Sanae Takaichi became Japan's first female prime minister.
Business
At 64 years
basics.
old, she stepped into power at a time when Japan's politics were unstable and the world around it was becoming tense. Within just a few days after taking office, she announced an unexpected plan. Japan would speed up its plan to spend 2% of its GDP on defense by the end of 2025, instead of waiting until 2027.
Don't forget the deal with Trump, America, the U.S. They have it on the website. The White House website. A deal with Japan for mining and source resources. And then Japan, this could be a reason. I want to wait and see what else they say, but Japan has also found an island. There's an island in Japan somewhere where by it, the ocean seabed has loads of the resources they need for like EV vehicles. It's what they told you on the White House and all this other stuff. Lithium is like one of the big ones. But I'm wondering if the island they're gonna mine the seabed floor with, the floor for minerals. I wonder if it's near China. We'll see.
That number may sound small, but for Japan, this was historic. For more than 40 years, Japan has followed an unwritten rule. Its defense spending should stay around 1% of its GDP. It was a symbol of its pacifist identity after World War II. So when Prime Minister Takaichi decided to double that target, it wasn't just a financial change, but a sign that Japan's mindset was shifting.
It's the partnership with the U.S. I'm pretty sure because of that partnership, the U.S. grants Japan some leniency now. And of course, Trump is doing it as a way to defend against, of course, China. This goes to some Civil War shit. Just don't want to tell you. Civil War never ended on communism when there's still communism. The USSR broke into many different countries. I'm assuming a lot of those countries. Who knows? I never looked into the specifics. But I mean, that didn't stop communism, which was the whole goal for the Cold War, at least for the West. The back and forth between communist countries and democratic. Vietnam Wars and all the other stuff. To the Soviet-Afghan Wars. Let's continue. Let's see what they say.
Seemed aggressive, but it's not the real reason behind the current chaos, because that began with a statement that hurt China to its core. The new prime minister said that if China attacks Taiwan, Japan will not stay silent and may even deploy its self-defense forces to protect its security.
That's what's
This was
up.
Japan's firm stance on Taiwan, and the first reason it pissed off China the most. Experts say Japan seemed too...
That's what's up. Taking a stance.
overconfident. And believe it or not, Japan has less chances to stand against China. But in reality, Japan has a good reason to be so firm against the mighty dragon. For 2025, Japan approved a record $55 billion military budget, the largest in its modern history and almost a 10% jump.
Again, it's possibly due to the U.S. deal. And then no matter what business U.S. does with any other country, they want insurance that that country could provide security, right? Or then if they can't, then I'm sure the U.S. will provide money and allow them to develop. Because I like how you brought up the World War II and how Japan wasn't allowed to like grow an army. I remember that.
From the previous year. When other security-related expenses like the Coast Guard are included, the total crosses $62 billion. For a country that once avoided anything that looked like military expansion, this was a bold move. But it's not just about the money. Japan also began reorganizing how its military works. In March of 2025, the government created a new
I think Germany, right? They're not allowed to have such a big military. Artillery. I think it comes down to artillery too and the weapons used. Of course, the Cold War was based on the arms race, nuclear arms race, but I'm sure a lot of other weapons. Nukes are the big money makers. All the countries seem to be obsessed with nuclear weapons and creating other weapons to acquire resources from other countries by force, by wars. The arms race.
new Joint Operations Command, a central body that combines the work of the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, and even space and cyber units. It's the first time Japan has ever had a unified defense command. The goal is to make communication faster and coordination smoother, especially in cases of a crisis. But the real game-changing moves were made by the mammoth standing behind it. The United States quickly supported the step. Washington upgraded U.S. Forces Japan into a joint.
Is he gonna get into what what I just saw yesterday? They're also doing business on mining, the ocean bed.
Force headquarters, making it easier for both countries to plan and operate together. At the same time, Japan started modernizing its weapons and technology. In March, Japanese naval ships began Tomahawk missile training with the US Navy. These are long-range cruise missiles that can strike targets over 600 miles away. Japan has decided to buy around 400 Tomahawks, which will give
Fuck, my bad. Again, look. I think this is on the second page. Here we are. Where is it? What's the deal with Japan? Drives forward billions investments in Japan. Industrial signed a landmark critical mineral agreement with Japan. Secured historic purchase of energy independent U.S. and combating illegal drug. Yep, it's legit.
Give it a much stronger defensive reach. It's also working on new hypersonic weapons and improving its own missile systems. These moves show that Japan is no longer relying on traditional defense. It is preparing for advanced, modern warfare. Prime Minister Takaichi has also made defense and diplomacy work side by side. She calls the Japan-US alliance the cornerstone of national security and wants closer partnerships with friendly nations across Asia. Japan has signed defense agreements with countries like the Philippines and continues to cooperate with Australia, South Korea, and India through the Quad Alliance. The message is clear. Japan wants to
Military enlisting in Japan is probably going to increase so much now. Maybe mandatory, who knows?
stand stronger in a changing world, not in isolation. Seems like Japan from a parallel universe, right? After all, it used to be seen as a symbol of peace, a nation that rebuilt itself from the ashes of war and focused on technology, trade, and progress instead of weapons. But now that image is starting to change. Quietly, Japan is preparing for something bigger. This is not a decision taken at midnight, but due to major changes and provocations happening around this island nation since decades. Japan realized that the peace
It's not just the nuclear race, it's the energy race. The race of energy, power, energy. What I mean by that is you got fission and there's fusion that's being worked on. I already got into all this.
peace it had enjoyed for almost 80 years was now surrounded by real threats from three directions: China, Russia, and North Korea. And these three countries did not grow aggressive overnight. Their actions kept increasing year after year, until Japan finally decided that silence and patience is no longer the best option. What looks like a recent escalation with China is in reality decades-old battles that are still being fought today. Over the past 15 years, China has expanded its power in every direction. At sea, in the air, and across Asia, and almost all of that expansion pushes directly against Japan's security. A part of the story begins with the Senkaku Islands, a small group of uninhabited islands in the East China Sea that Japan controls, but China claims. In 2012, when Japan bought 3 of these islands to manage them peacefully, China responded aggressively and started sending ships into the area.
I think I asked chat. There it is. Near Minamarit. Sekukaku. Nah, it's not the ones. Specific. Where's that at? Where's that one island? It's by China. Oh, I was looking in the wrong place. Right here. Oh, that's pretty far. Nah, it's pretty close. What am I talking about? They need to secure that. It would make sense now. If they're doing mining over here, probably this large ass area, right? They need security. And that's why they're trying to support Taiwan. Bruh, it makes so much sense. Money, money, money. Money. I'm looking at the big money. Y'all don't even see the big picture, probably. The whole reason behind all this resources. Money, money, money. Money. Wow.
These were not normal fishing boats, but government vessels. What began as a rare visit slowly grew into an almost daily presence. By 2024, Chinese ships were there nearly every single day of the year. During the same period, China quietly transformed its Coast Guard by placing it under military authority.
And that's why they did the deal with the US to have better security for their mining operation. But of course, the US wants a cut of that too now in exchange for security. Because money fucking talks. They're all gonna make money no matter what. They're all gonna get loaded off that shit.
And expanding its fleet with larger, heavier armed vessels. These ships look like law enforcement boats, but they acted like military units, giving China a way to increase pressure without openly starting conflict. But China's ambitions went far beyond these islands, and sadly Japan could hardly do anything about it. China began building the world's fastest growing navy, expanding so quickly that in just a few years, it added more ships than Japan, India, Australia, France, and the UK combined.
Fuck no.
It upgraded its missile systems, including long-range anti-ship weapons and new hypersonic designs.
That's pretty crazy because the UK has like one of the biggest navies. That's insane.
Which made the region more dangerous for any navy operating near China's coast. China also grew more active around Taiwan, flying fighter jets, drones, and surveillance aircraft across the Taiwan Strait almost daily. Since Taiwan sits directly next to Japan's Southwest Islands, any tension there becomes a direct security issue for Tokyo. If China ever moves against Taiwan, Japan knows the conflict will likely spill into its waters and airspace. At the same time, China expanded its reach towards the Philippines, pushing into the South China Sea with a mix of Coast Guard ships, maritime militia, and naval vessels. This matters to Japan, because these sea lanes connect Japan to its trade routes and energy supplies. If China dominates this area, it gains leverage over the entire region. And then came the large-scale military drills. In late
Because of the resources found in Japan.
2024, China launched its biggest exercise in 30 years. More than 90 ships and over 100 aircraft, practicing blockades, invasions, and coordinated strikes across almost the entire First Island chain, from the South China Sea all the way up to the waters near Japan. For Tokyo, this was a signal that China was preparing for real conflict scenarios, not just simple training. China's behavior in the air also changed. Japanese jets scrambled hundreds of times a year to intercept Chinese fighters, bombers, and drones flying close to Japanese territory. In August of 2024, Japan recorded its first ever Chinese military aircraft entering its...
It's for the resources. I'll be back. Alright.
its airspace, even if only for a short time. Chinese drones began flying more frequently too, reaching new areas that they had never approached before. These flights forced Japan
Really?
to stay on constant alert and proved that China was testing how far it could push. And as if China was not enough, its allies stepped in too. This was something even more worrying: deepening military cooperation between China and Russia. In 2025, both countries held joint submarine and naval exercises near Japan, sharing sonar data and practicing operations together in waters critical to Japan's defenses. For Tokyo, this meant challenges were no longer coming from one direction, but from two major powers moving in the same direction. And while all this happened, China unveiled its most advanced aircraft carrier, the
Hell
Fujian,
no.
equipped with electromagnetic catapults that allow fighter jets to take off with full payloads, extending China's ability to project power farther into the Pacific. Combined with its missile systems, drone fleets, and Coast Guard pressure,
Hell
China
no.
now has the tools to challenge the balance of power across Japan's entire neighborhood, from the East China Sea to Taiwan to the South China Sea. And right now, China is enraged because of the Taiwan issue. Or that's what it's trying to show the world to hide the real intention. On paper, China's anger is all about Taiwan. But beneath the surface, it's the decades-old scars Japan carved into China. The scars that still whisper the same cry across generations: revenge. It's so deeply rooted in them that in 2024, a 10-year-old child was
Jeez.
fatally stabbed in China. That wasn't a normal day.
26